Welcome back, everyone. The Nigerian Air Force recently marked its 61st anniversary precisely on the 15th of May. So it's been 6 decades of defending Nigeria's airspace, supporting national security, and more recently playing a critical role in the fight against insurgency across the country. A force that has evolved from humble beginnings into a cornerstone of our national defense and pride. But how far has the Air Force come in this fight? What impact has it made? And what more is required to achieve lasting peace? Joining us tonight is well-respected Group Captain Sadiq Garba-Shehu, security consultant, former spokesman of the Nigerian Air Force. And for the next few minutes, he would take us through the fascinating journey of the NAF, its origins, its defining moments, and its enduring legacy. Group Captain, good evening. Thanks a lot for joining us on Politics Tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. So I want us to start with the origins and establishment of the NAF, because, you know, the only thing new in the world is the history you do not know, and there is no better teacher than history in determining the future. So can you take us back to the beginning? What led to the creation of the Nigerian Air Force in 1964? And what role did the German Air Force play in helping establish the NAF in its early years? Also, what key milestones would you say define the growth of the NAF since its establishment?
Thank you very much. When tracing the history of the Nigerian Air Force, we have to admit that our founding fathers of Nigeria in the First Republic, they were visionaries. Quickly after independence in 1964, they realized that while we have a Nigerian army and a Nigerian navy, but if you trace the history of the Nigerian army, it started even right from the World War I, World War II. Nigerian soldiers, even though not under the flag of Nigerian army, had participated in all these wars. So by independence, we already have an established Nigerian army and a Nigerian navy. But then the founding fathers thought that it is necessary for Nigeria to have all the complements in the 3 domains of warfare. That is in the land, in the air, and also in the sea. So it is by that, they passed an act of parliament that time that established the Nigerian Air Force on 18 April 1964. Initially, the Air Force was designed just to take care of transport and logistics. However, with the, with the coming of the Civil War, it was decided, or it was seen as necessary, that the Air Force also had to have some attack capabilities. The first set of cadets of the Nigerian Air Force, were trained in Egypt, Canada, and India. Nigeria first saw, the Nigerian Air Force also had the first aircraft that saw combat during the unfortunate Civil War of 1967 to 1970. At that time, all that the Nigerian Air Force had were MiG-17, which were Russian aircrafts, and also the Ilyushin-28 bomber. The MiG-17 was a fighter, but despite that, the Air Force in its founding days, gave a good account of itself, leading to the victory of the federal troops. In the 1970s and 1980s, the Air Force expanded its fleet, bringing aircraft like MiG-21, and then the Jaguar, Sepkat Grumman Jaguar, and the Alpha jets. Apart from the Alpha jets, which are still in, still with the Nigerian Air Force, the Jaguar and MiG-21, which were introduced in the 1970s and 80s, are no longer there. Later on, in the 1990s and into the 2000s, the Air Force saw an expansion of its fleet, with so many aircraft being brought, beginning with the time of late President Shehu Shagari, who brought a lot of other aircraft, including the C-130, which is a hallmark aircraft of the Nigerian Air Force, which has seen service since that time. To the current day, where the Nigerian Air Force can boast of several aircraft in the fleet, including fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters and even UAVs. In general, from that humble beginning in the 1960s to the present time, we're talking about that Air Force is celebrating its 61st anniversary. The Air Force has seen a great expansion, both in terms of human resources and in terms of equipment. So much so that now the Nigerian Air Force is being touted as the #3 Air Force in the whole of Africa, and probably around number 31st globally. So this is where the Nigerian Air Force is. And in terms of experience, the Air Force has shown its teeth, not only in Nigeria but abroad. In the 1970s and the 1980s, during the colonial struggles, the Air Force has carried flights to countries like Zimbabwe, which used to be Rhodesia. Also in United States, United Nations peacekeeping, Air Force has participated in operations in Rwanda and other countries. Also, we cannot forget the exploits of the Nigerian Air Force more recently, if I can say that's in time, in the conflict, the ECOMOG conflict in Liberia and Sierra Leone. In Nigeria here also, the Air Force has been actively engaged in all the conflicts against internal subversions, like the counterterrorism operation that is going on in the Northeast, and also operations against the banditry. In terms of humanitarian affairs, the Air Force has also answered when there are humanitarian crises, like during flooding, like during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Air Force has flown much needed supplies, whether it is medicine, whether it is humanitarian items. Also during elections, we have been the Air Force, providing support to the Electoral Commission in order to ensure that electoral material are going.
All right, then, Group Captain, let's take these steps one after another, because I just don't want us to go over these struggles and achievements, just so everyone would learn. I mean, if the Air Force was supposed to be in charge of just logistics and transportation, I'm sure there must have been some challenges. But talking about growth and transformation, how did the Nigerian Air Force evolve through the 1970s, the 1980s, in terms of structure and capabilities? At what point did the NAF begin to train its own pilots and engineers independently?
Yes, thank you very much. Initially, like I said, the training of pilots and engineers was mostly done abroad. Later on, after the experience with the Egyptian, Canadians, and the Indians, there was a time that the Air Force also was solely trained by the Germans. There was an arrangement for the Germans to train both technicians, engineers, and pilots. But as the Air Force, gathered its resources together, beginning in the early 1990s, the Air Force began fully to train its own engineers and pilots in-house. So much so that now most of the initial, that is ab initio training, and the basic training is done in-house. For example, initial training for all Nigerian Air Force pilots is now being undertaken in Kaduna, at the Air Force base in Kaduna. And then you can do the basic training either in Kayenji or Kano. So this is where the Air Force, has moved from relying solely on foreign training to domesticating its own training. Even though still, because, technologies evolve, Nigeria buys modern aircrafts, still that is not to say that the Nigerian Air Force does not train its pilots abroad. When it's necessary for high, a higher flying training, the Nigerian Air Force still sends its engineers and its pilots abroad. But then, to a large extent, the Air Force has grown to shoulder its responsibility by training not only pilots and engineers, but also by manufacturing, some of its items here. Like, for example, there is this Egumi unarmed aerial vehicle, which was designed and produced here in Nigeria. So we can say, despite the fact that Nigeria is not a high technology country per se, but the Nigerian Air Force have been able to domesticate its needs in terms of training pilots, in terms of training engineers, and even some rudimentary, equipment that is needed for its operation.
Wow, interesting. Great to know. But can you highlight some of the most notable operations or missions in the NFF's history?
Well, we have to come back home and start with the Civil War. Like I said, during the Civil War, the Air Force was just starting. But despite that, it was able to use its MiG-17 and Illusion-28 to a good effect to contribute to the success of the federal forces and to bring the unfortunate Civil War to an end. After the Civil War, there has been several, United Nations peacekeeping operations where the Nigerian Air Force either has taken our troops there or has continued to provide logistics. Like, for example, just before the Rwandan genocide, the peacekeeping operation in Rwanda, the Nigerian Air Force was heavily involved. But one operation that readily comes to mind where Nigerian Air Force actually saw combat was in the ECOMOG operation, where the Nigerian Air Force, flew over 3,000 combat missions using the Alpha jets. The Alpha jet is an aircraft of pride for the Nigerian Air Force because it has served the Air Force in several theaters of operation. Apart from ECOMOG, the Alpha jets were also used at the beginning of the conflict in Cote d'Ivoire. It was also used in the conflict in Mali. And also, if we remember, during the crisis in Gambia, when President Yahya Jammeh refused to hand over to an elected government, it was the arrival of the Nigerian Air Force Alpha jets overhead the capital of Gambia that finally made Yahya Jammeh to pack his things and leave the country. So these are some of the operations. Of course, again, the current operation we're talking about, both in the northeast and in the northwest, against bandits and the terrorists, whether they are ISWAP or Boko Haram, the Nigerian Air Force is contributing its quota to ensure that Nigeria retain its territorial integrity.
That will lead me to my next question, either for the purpose of clarity or better understanding. So what kinds of missions has the NAF been carrying out in the northeast? Is it surveillance, airstrikes, or logistics?
All. Okay. The Nigerian Air Force has different types of aircraft. Some are used for even, inter-theater movement. That is airlift. They have some medium airlift aircraft which are used, but the most important one is the close air support that the Nigerian Air Force gives to the ground forces. And this includes strike. It also has aircraft that are used for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. You have to locate where the enemy is to either guide other fighter aircraft or even ground forces to where the enemy is. So the Air Force, in essence, provides close air support. It provides logistic support. It provides in-theater movement like transporting of troops, like medical evacuation, and in addition, it provides intelligence, search and rescue.
All right, Group Captain, I have more questions for you, but first, let's take this break and we'll be right back. Please stay with us, everyone. This is Politics Tonight.
Thank you.
Voted as the best TV station of the year. TVC News breaks into the core of every event as they happen. Following all nationwide big and impactful stories. Without the news from every perspective. Covering every human angle. I am Veronica, bringing you the news you would want to watch.
Every major news story is with many perspectives and layered with different levels of impact.
Hello. What time did this happen? We will be right there.
At TVC News, we follow the big and major news, gathering the facts, witnessing the outcome.
I am here live at the aftermath of the approval of the new national minimum wage.
We are TV Station of the Year, not just for breaking news, but for being first, fair and accurate. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you very much for staying with us on the program. Nigerian Air Force at 61, and tonight we're taking a look at the fascinating journey of the NAF, its origins, its defining moments, and its enduring legacy. Helping us do justice to this conversation is Group Captain Sadiq Garubacheo, retired. Thank you so much for staying with us on the program, Group Captain. I want us to take a look at operational impacts. So, what are some major air operations or campaigns that demonstrate the NAF's role in combating Boko Haram and other insurgent groups? Would you say the Air Force has, significantly weakened the operational capacity of insurgents over the years?
Thank you very much. First, permit me to say that counterinsurgency operation is a marathon, not a race. So definitely sometimes you have up and downs, you have gains, you have reversals. But by and by, the Nigerian Air Force has been able to hold its own and make sure that it has pinned down the Boko Haram within its limited resources. I emphasize limited resources because it is essential, to understand that the Air Force can only do what it can do with what it has. And while initially I told you that currently Nigerian Air Force is even the #3rd Air Force in the whole of Africa, that is not to say the Air Force has all that it needs. In general, the Nigerian Air Force is still limited in the number of aircraft it has. It is still limited in the aspect of maintenance because, like you see, aircraft are imported from abroad and sometimes even a small diplomatic row can make it that it is impossible for the Air Force to have, equipment or to have spare parts and repairs, as the case may be. But despite all these challenges, the Nigerian Air Force has been able to perform creditably in the Northeast operation against the Boko Haram. It has, in many occasions, routed, identified terrorist locations and routed either direct hit on the terrorists or on their logistic basis. So by and by, again, like I said, within the constraints that the Nigerian Air Force has, it can be said to have performed creditably in the counterinsurgency operation that is happening in the Northeast.
But I also like to know how, how the NAF is responding to this increasing demand for air power in asymmetric warfare. Would you say air power has been a game changer in counterinsurgency operations?
Definitely, from the from evidence we are getting, and even from the literature of the terrorists when they release, the greatest nightmare for them is an aircraft flying overhead, because there's really nothing they can do once an aircraft is able to locate where the bandits are in real time, and it is lucky also to locate them where there are no civilians. That is the greatest nightmare for the bandits. So definitely the application of air power, not only in the Nigerian context, all over the world, is a game changer when it comes to modern warfare. The air power, the capacity to travel, the capacity to be fast, the capacity to arrive on time, all these are characteristics which make air power very lethal, including the kind of ordinances that the aircraft might deploy. Either they are bombs, guns, or precision-guided munitions. Air power is a game changer in the Northeast, as well as we have seen it in other theaters of war.
Now, Group Captain, this particular administration has increased budgetary allocation to the security sector. As some security experts would say, we need more money. Some Nigerians will say we're pumping too much money into the sector, but nothing to show for it. Some other Nigerians will say we keep buying equipment, we keep buying Super Tucano jets, and yet we're still fighting, we're still dealing with insecurity. From what you know, how have new platforms like the Super Tucano jet, attack helicopters and drones enhanced the NAF's strike and surveillance capabilities?
Now, for an Air Force or for any military institution to buy a certain equipment, there are preliminary investigations that are done. People don't just buy, or professional military don't just buy aircraft or a bomb or an APC just for the sake of it. Like currently we're having the India and Pakistan war. It may interest you to know that there are certain aircraft that have been told they have performed creditably. So naturally, air forces or armed forces will go for such equipment. So it is in the same way, the Nigerian armed forces in general and the Nigerian Air Force in particular, before homing in on a particular aircraft or a particular equipment, they must have seen it display in other theaters of war, in conditions similar to those of Nigeria. That is what makes the Nigerian armed forces or the Nigerian Air Force to go for a particular aircraft. The Super Tucano, as far as aircraft that are used for counterinsurgency operations, where the terrorists are located inside the same country and fighting the same government, the Super Tucano has performed creditably. And because of this, record that it has, that is what made Nigeria, not only Nigeria and other countries that have similar threats, to go for it. But then, the performance of any machine is a combination of the machine itself and the human factor. So you need a combination of the two to bring out the best. And with regards to people that will say that Nigeria has spent a lot, yes, that will say relatively. When I say relatively, here in Nigeria, we'll make comparison like this here. We'll say defense is taking more money than education, is taking more money than health. Now, naturally, a Nigerian will say Nigeria has spent a lot of money. But when you make, a research in countries that have equivalent or similar problems with Nigeria, that have similar economics with Nigeria, the truth is that Nigeria is not spending a lot on security. The measure to look at that is that since this insurgency started, the Nigerian budget, how you measure whether countries are spending enough, is what percentage of the GDP is going for security. Till now, I don't think Nigeria has ever spent 1% of its GDP. But when we compare with countries like Colombia, like Sri Lanka, when they are facing the same, insurgency, you will see that they spend up to, there are countries that used to spend up to 7% of their GDP. But like I told you, Nigeria has never spent even 1%. What we spent on security is averaging 0.4 to 0.5%. So on that aspect, Nigeria is not even spending enough for a country that is at war. Having said that, it is only responsible for me to say that even if the money we are supposed to spend is not there again, there is the aspect of how you use the money. So that is another issue.
So, Group Captain,
but as far as saying that Nigeria is spending a lot of money, Nigeria is not spending. Permit me to come back to the Air Force. You know, remember I told you Nigeria Air Force is the number 3 Air Force.
Yes.
Just to, to put this in their proper perspective. We're having like 179 platforms. The countries that are first and second in Africa is Egypt and Algeria.
Yes.
Do you know how many aircraft Egypt Air Force has? They have 1,080 aircraft. Algeria has 547. And you may wonder, is Egypt or Algeria facing the same security challenges that Nigeria is having? So with a country with the security challenges we're having, with the size of our country, with our population, with our economy, we're having 179 platforms. So I want people in debating this. Certainly the country is spending money, but relatively for a country at war, compared to other countries with the same indices like Nigeria, I will again say Nigeria is not spending enough like a country that at war. However, like I said, sometimes it's not even the volume of the money, it's how you spend the money. And this is where the issue of oversight, whether the issue of direction for the Nigerian armed forces comes into it.
And also, Group Captain, how important is accountability and transparency? Even if you're supposed to or were to spend more, how important is accountability and transparency?
Very, very important. Very, very important. Without, plugging a dead horse, whenever I'm talking about this issue, I always say you take it at the family level. If a husband who is the breadwinner of a family, permit me to the ladies, it's not always that the husband is the breadwinner, but we're assuming an average family, whether the man is the breadwinner of the family. If you used to give your wife 1 million naira for monthly allowance, with due respect, if you don't have a God-fearing woman or a woman who loves you and loves her children, that 1 million could be spent without your children having proper food to eat or going to proper school. So what do I mean? It is not only the money, it's what you do with the money. And with due respect, the oversight function that should be exercised by the executive branch and the National Assembly to ensure that whatever money is put, even though it is not enough, we have to remember that whatever money is put is actually deployed to operational issues, is actually deployed to taking care of the soldiers that are killed or soldiers that are wounded. All these are issues that the military on its own cannot do it. Even if they do it, there should be an external oversight, and under the Constitution, the person to do this oversight is the executive branch. When I say the executive branch, that's either the president doing it himself or putting his minister of defense to do that. On the other hand, you have the legislatures, the various committees that are in charge. With due respect, they have a lot of work to do because currently they are not, performing as expected to ensure that the money we are spending and the hope we are advocating that more money will be spent on defense, but you have to follow the money and see what it's used at. If not, you'll continue to rent the money, but you will not see the result out of it.
Absolutely. Now, Group Captain, let's talk about civilian protection. Airstrikes can be controversial. We've had our own fair share of this conversation. Sad moment, but how does the NAF minimize the risk of civilian casualty in populated or volatile areas?
Well, permit me to say, as an expert, which is my domain, and as expert in international humanitarian law, it is taken under international humanitarian law that collateral damage is inevitable. That means it is likely to happen. However, what is bad under international humanitarian law is to accept that the attacker is going to attack without taking any precautions. So the Nigerian Air Force and also the Army during air operations, they have incurred some collateral damage. But today at the anniversary of the 65th anniversary, there is one thing I must comment. For the first time, the Nigerian Air Force is coming out publicly to anybody who attended that event to talk about collateral damage issues. And also, they have developed a plan where henceforth they will make sure that all necessary precautions as demanded by international humanitarian law are taken. Now, after taking all necessary precautions, you may still incur collateral damage, but certainly the frequency will not be as somebody who didn't take precautions. The Air Force have also, taken an undertaking that henceforth, whenever such collateral damage happens, they will be open about it. They will see what remedies they could give to those people, and they will upgrade their training. For me, I must say this is commendable because a few years back, to be honest with you, even for somebody for the Air Force, the military does not want to talk about collateral damage. But with this, with this realization, and also with more acquisition of precision capability, collateral damage happens as misidentification of target. Sometimes it's as a result of low quality intelligence. I think the Nigerian Air Force and the Nigerian Armed Forces in particular are taking more steps to ensure that this, these processes are put in place, and where it happens, despite the best of intention, that mitigation measures are done, training is given, equipment is going. In terms of collateral damage, having cameras of different that can, have more precision, having targeting systems, having training, all this will lead to reduction in collateral damage, if at all it does not eliminate it completely. And right. I must say that the Nigerian Armed Forces, now that we are talking frankly about this collateral damage, as we saw today at the, anniversary of the Nigerian Air Force, I hope they will continue to follow this way, because that is the professional way. That is what international humanitarian law demands, and that is what the international community will be looking at whenever our forces are conducting their operations.
So, Group Captain, let's stay on this, because I want you to speak to how precision airstrikes are reducing collateral damage while increasing effectiveness.
Well, in this case, yes, you do not envy the operators, because at the same time, you are expected to go and hit the enemy that is embedded within the population. But professionalism, international humanitarian law demands that you take all possible precautions to ensure that in doing so, you hit the bad guys without harming the good guys. It is not easy. But then again, like I said, the combination of the pilot capacity, the combination of training that was done, the combination of the kind of equipment like the targeting systems, all the combination of all these 4 or 5 aspects, when combined effectively, can reduce the incidence of collateral damage. It is not easy, but then this is why a professional is different from a non-professional. A professional can make the decision that will ensure that collateral damage is avoided. But again, like I said, where it happens, the basic thing is to investigate. What did you do during planning? What training did you have? What precautions did you put in place? Even under international humanitarian law, even if you are taking under the, to the Hague or the International Criminal Court, if a pilot or a planner of an operation can demonstrate that he has taken feasible precaution, and then maybe 1 or 2 people, unfortunately, even one life is too much, one person happens to be at the wrong time and in the wrong place, and he is killed, international humanitarian law can take cognizance of that you have acted professionally and you have taken all precautions that are necessary to avoid collateral damage.
But apart from this issue of collateral damage, I'm sure there are other unique challenges the Air Force faces in insurgency operations and insurgency zones, rather, like the Northeast, the Northwest, the North Central. Are terrain, weather conditions, interference factors in mission planning?
Very important question and very necessary question. Air power, air power is inherently, limited by certain characteristics. You talk of weather. Weather could constrain the pilot. It could constrain the aircraft. Strong winds could be a factor. And also, like I said, Nigeria, most of these aircraft we employ, we bring them from outside. We are not a high technology country yet. So definitely sometimes when you have spares, when you have repairs to undertake, that might affect what the Air Force can do at any particular time. So I want people to understand that things like weather, things like strong winds can constrain it in such a way that a pilot cannot go. Sometimes even night, even though there are pilots that can fight both day and night, but it depends from one pilot to another. So definitely there are certain things that are outside the control of the pilot that may make the Air Force not to take off, or it may make the pilot to go, but he was not able to drop his weapons and he has to come back. Because like I said again, he is battling with 2 choices. I want to hit the enemy, but at the same time, the enemy is embedded within the population. I don't want to hit, innocent civilians. So sometimes a pilot might even go and find that he does not have a clear identification of the target. In which case, the ideal thing or the professional thing to do is to cancel the mission and come back home. So many things could come that could constrain Air Force unleashing. I've heard people saying carpet bomb all the aircraft, but honestly, a professional cannot go and do carpet bombing. Unless you have a clear target where you know these are the bad guys. A professional pilot cannot just drop his weapons just because out of frustration that there are people there. It is a very difficult thing, but then the professional must always wait for the best day when he can get a clear target to make sure that he's hitting Boko Haram or he's hitting bandits without hitting one woman or one farmer that is in the farm in the location.
Interesting. Group Captain, I'm sure you know that some Nigerians will be very surprised to hear you say that beyond combat, the NAF also supports humanitarian or evacuation missions in insurgency-affected areas. But let's talk about morale and welfare. This is something we really do not talk about. We've talked about the welfare of the police, we talk about the welfare of the army or other sister agencies. But for the NAF, what is being done to support NAF personnel deployed in these high-risk zones? And from your own perspective, is the Air Force winning this part of the war?
As far as welfare is one great aspect for any military institution, whether it is Air Force, whether it is the whole armed forces, welfare is very necessary. And in the Nigerian military, or in the Nigerian Air Force in particular that you asked, there are certain allowances that are given to people who are deployed in, in the front lines. And this is natural. You do not expect somebody, me staying in Abuja in an air-conditioned office, to be collecting the same allowances for somebody who is in Maiduguri or is in Marchi. So the armed forces, they incentivize the duty that is done. And there's also, when you talk about monetary welfare, it's not monetary welfare. There's also medical welfare. The pilot or the soldier or the seaman needs to understand that if I get injured, if I break my leg, if I break my hand, if I have the military will give me the best medical, medical care that money can buy. So all these are some of the things. And even again, when the worst happens, which normally happens, because any soldier knows that when you go to a mission, you may come back, you may not come back. What happens when I die? What happens to my widow? What happens to my children? So all these kind of welfare packages are there for the Nigerian armed forces. However, are they enough? They are not. And I think the government will really have to look at it. And, this will only attract people to join the Nigerian military. So more welfare is needed because without welfare, definitely that is going to affect the performance of our armed forces.
So apart from welfare, what more does the NAF need? Now, I'm talking in terms of policy, resources or public support to finish the job.
You mean welfare policies?
Absolutely. Resources, policy. What more does the NAF need to finish the job? And also public support.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I just finished comparing, the number of aircraft that the Nigerian Air Force has compared to Egypt, compared to Algeria,
yes,
which are first and second, and then Nigeria is third. But as you can see from the figures I gave you, you may miss it if you say Nigeria is the third Air Force in the Nigerian Air Force, because the gap between the Egyptian Air Force, for example, and the Algerian Air Force, Nigeria is a third, but it is a far third. So definitely, again, with due respect, I think most Nigerians don't understand that. It's not as if the Nigerian Air Force has enough platforms to prosecute this war, but they are making best use of what they have. So definitely, the Nigerian Air Force need more resources. People are quick to point to Kano has brought, but that is just only one aircraft. I'm just telling you now that Egypt has 1,080. While we are talking about 179. So definitely, the Air Force needs platforms, especially, attack aircraft and also attack helicopters. These are very necessary. It will be indiscreet of me to say this is the number of attack helicopters that Nigerian Air Force has or the types of aircraft they have. I wouldn't say that. But definitely, from what I know, the number is not enough for the Nigerian Air Force to simultaneously cover the northeast, cover the northwest, cover the Niger Delta, or cover the south-south. Yes, so definitely there is need for that. There's also the need for more UAVs. Okay. The Nigerian Air Force need more UAVs. The Nigerian Air Force now that Boko Haram have also entered into the UAV business, Nigeria needs counter-UAV capacity. Nigerian Air Force needs more ISR aircraft. The ISR aircraft in the Nigerian inventory, again, they are not many. I'm not going to disclose the number, but they are not many. So when people are talking, I want Nigerians to always understand, it is your Air Force, it is your armed forces. Please weigh in with your legislators. When they are talking that we have bought this, we have bought this, certainly how many aircraft, how many equipment does the Nigerian Air Force have? How many does the Army have? How much does the Navy have? Because there is tendency to think that our Nigerian Air Force is so much equipped that it can do anything. It is not so. Definitely they are trying with what they have, but there are a lot of gaps that are remaining. When we compare Nigeria with other countries that are not even at war, Nigeria is not doing enough.
We're not doing enough. Thank you for going there, because I wanted to ask you about the public perception of the Air Force, if indeed it has changed over the decades. But Group Captain, from your perspective as a Group Captain who is now retired, how does it feel to be part of such a rich legacy? How does it feel to, I mean, what part of the NAF history inspires you the most personally?
Well, yes, I must confirm that I'm very proud to have served in the Nigerian Air Force during my time while I retired. So it is with all happiness and enthusiasm that I joined the serving officers and men and the Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Hassan, to go and celebrate Nigeria at 61. When we look back and when Nigerian Air Force started in 1964 and where it has, reached now, I am currently writing a book on Nigerian performance in peacekeeping operations from 1960 to date. When I see where the Nigerian Air Force has performed in far-flung countries, in Nigeria here, I think I'm very proud to share this rich history and to know that Nigerian Air Force has come a long way from those early days of 1964 to 2025 that we are. But there are still room for improvement. The Nigerian government will have to help. One of the greatest pride for me was, I think, 2 years ago, while I was serving with the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, when the Sudan conflict started. I was very glad to have flown a Nigerian Air Force aircraft to go and carry our students. I was on that mission that went there and brought our students when they were hauled up in Sudan, some of them fearing for their lives. I was very proud to see Nigerian air crew that went there and rescued those children and brought them back in one piece. It is something that I am very proud about.
Thank you.
And I wish many safe and successful flying hours for the officers and men of the Nigerian Air Force.
All right. Thank you for sharing that story with us. So 2 questions before I let you go. What do you want Nigerians to understand about the sacrifices and achievements of the Air Force in this fight? And what advice would you give to young Nigerians aspiring to join the Nigerian Air Force?
Thank you very much. The advice I will give, you said advice to Nigerians who want to join the Nigerian Air Force or the military in general.
No, young
First,
Nigerians,
I have to tell you,
Air Force.
Young Nigerians who want to join.
Yes.
I think joining the military is a noble profession. If your desire in life is only to make money, if money is only the thing that matters in your life, then probably the military is not for you. But if you want to serve humanity, if you want to serve your country, it wants to be your brother's keeper, I think the Nigerian military is something that you should, even if you don't do it for the whole of your life, you need military service, to show that self-abnegation, that humanity in you, and also to gain, personal discipline. You need to serve in the Nigerian military. So I will enjoin any well-meaning Nigerian young man who is able-bodied, if he has the chance to join the Nigerian military. And for the Nigerian government, I will continue to, and the Nigerian population in general, I will still call on them to please understand, when you talk about the Nigerian Army, Nigerian Air Force, Nigerian Navy, before you fix your expectations very high, please understand, the gaps within which they are operating. I only talk about Nigerian Air Force today, but I can equally tell you that the Nigerian Army, the Nigerian Navy, even the Nigerian Police, they are operating under very minimal conditions, whether it is in terms of men that are required, whether it is in terms of equipment. So they are just making the best of what they have. There are necessarily many things that they need that are not present. That is what I want Nigerians to understand. And when you are talking to your lawmakers, when you are talking to your governors, please make them understand that.
Thank you for saying that, Group Captain. But at 61, how should the NAF be remembered, and what does the future look like?
Well, at 61, what the Air Force should remember is like the forefathers who set up the Nigerian Air Force. We should not let them down. The services of our heroes past who have brought Air Force through different stages. In the Nigerian Air Force, we have a Hall of Fame. This is about, I think, the 24th Chief of Air Staff. So we've had honorable gentlemen and pioneers of the Nigerian Air Force who strove, to build the Nigerian Air Force. And also the political leaders over many areas who build the Air Force that it is. When we remember that, we'll make sure that today's airmen, officers and men, they continue to fly the flag with pride and ensure that they do not let down the pioneers of the Nigerian Air Force down. Whatever was done, the prayer of any veteran like me who had served is to make sure that the Air Force of the future is far, far better than the Air Force that I left. That is always our prayer.
All right, Group Captain, thank you so much for joining us tonight and shedding light on the legacy and evolution of the Nigerian Air Force over the past 61 years. I mean, it's clear enough that the NAF history is not just military, it's deeply tied to the political security and national development of this country. Thank you so much for joining us, Group Captain Sadiq Garba. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much for watching, everyone. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But before we go, let's tell you that the views and reactions of our resource persons are theirs and have no connection with TVC News. Meanwhile, you can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode at midnight. Get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, and X at TVC News NG and at Olajubo KW using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News NG. I am Olajubo KW. Good night, everyone.